Life in a world that keeps changing. Think that it's progress you're making.
Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. How are you doing today? Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Uche and I live in Spain. Yes, people, I said it. I wasn't going to be a Nigerian wife. In fact, this was one of the things I deliberated with my husband, before our wedding. I said before our wedding. When I met my husband, there was nothing like him traveling when I met him. But eventually it happened that he wanted to travel. So one of the things we decided was that I was going to join him. Everything should be ready. And thankfully, my husband, we agreed. My father was on the same page with me. My father-in-law was on the same page with me. He kept telling my husband, "Alukola nwunye gị hapụ ya here. Onwekwa onye ga-ahapụ ya," So all of us, we agreed and we prayed towards it and it worked for us. Okay. And don't forget that when I got engaged to my husband, so he traveled and he stayed 2 years. Then before he came back, by then everything was set. His documents were set. Then when we got married, like I always say, I stayed a year plus, before I joined him. So this is me trying to tell you the pros of distant relationship. So I was in a distant marriage relationship for 3 years plus before I joined my husband. And now that I joined my husband, I can, correctly say of long distance relationship. Okay, so the first thing that made me make that decision, that even when my husband traveled, we kept talking about it's not going to happen. So was that when my husband that was away, when he was in Spain, it took us longer time to settle disputes. Yeah, it took us longer time, considering the fact that he was living abroad and I was in Nigeria. And don't forget that it was our first year in marriage. So normally, first year in marriage, you try to learn yourselves and all that. But from my experience, it would have been a whole lot easier for us if maybe we got married and we're living together. Because then, if we have a misunderstanding, by the time I want to call him, he might not be available. The time I want to call him, maybe that before when we had misunderstanding, I was angry. Maybe when my anger is done, I want to call him, he's not available. I was maybe misunderstanding that he's still angry. Do you get that kind of thing? Or when he wants to call me, I'm still angry and stuff like that. But now that we are together, I must tell you the truth and the reality of it. The issue of misunderstanding reduced by, let's say, 80%. There are many things we do together and we stay together. And one thing I also would say about living abroad, I don't know about Nigeria, like living with you. In this abroad, we don't have so much, social activities. It's like your work, especially in summer, your work, you have your family. So for two people that actually want their marriage to work, this abroad has a way of bonding couple. If you truly want your marriage, also the issue of misunderstanding has reduced for us. So the issue of the time when you agree to come together is not usually the issue now. Now the misunderstanding of a thing has reduced drastically. So for me, in that regard, I think long distance relationship give room, for longer period of settling disputes. Yeah, from my own experience. And when you stay longer, in a marriage with having misunderstanding, you're giving the devil the room to penetrate. As we all know, the devil is just moving up and down, looking for who to destroy. So if he gets that loophole, you have a misunderstanding, 1-2 days, you have not settled, he will find, one thing that will lead to another thing and will lead to another thing, that will cause more problems. So that was one of the things, that I saw then that was in a distant relationship. I said, why can't I go my hair? Is it how we're going to start? Taking time to, settle dispute and all that. But I'm thankful to God now that we're living, we have understood ourselves. There's no much, by the grace of God, no much of that thing. If there's anything like that, before the day breaks, the following day we must have settled, because we're going to sleep on the same bed. And obviously, we are not devils. So we have to, make up. So that's one thing. Another thing is getting involved in our lives. Like I wanted my husband to be part of our lives. I wanted him to take his place as a father. That time he traveled after our wedding. Yeah. So he stayed a year. So I kept asking myself, like, assuming I conceived, that period, and maybe I'll just call him on the phone, I'm pregnant, and that will be that. We'll rejoice over the phone. Then by the time he gets back, assuming I agreed to be a Nigerian wife, by the time he gets back, the child must have been like 2 years. Then I will be raising my children all by myself. So I feel, for me, I feel I wanted him to be involved. I wanted him to take his place, as the man. I remember when I had my first son, guys, when we came back home from the hospital, me and my husband, we used to drag, who will carry Elvis that time. He will carry, I will say, give me now. You have carried him for a long time. He will carry, I say, give, that kind of thing. That's the joy, of being together, which I didn't think would have experienced it if we were apart. When Elvis started, when my first son and our children, when they start school, my husband is always there. We are together. We'll take them at least that first day of school. That's the joy for me. That's the perspective I see marriage, doing things together, being involved. And come to think of it, how many years, Seth, do we have to spend on this earth? 100, 120. And how old are we now? The best things we can do is to spend it with the ones we love and the ones we cherish. I know that living here, could be challenging physically. But I think if I was living in Nigeria, being the Nigerian wife, and my husband is abroad, maybe I'll have helps up and down. But they cannot replace they cannot replace the space of my husband. It would have been more of mental and emotional stress. And physically, you cannot remove that physical challenge, that physical stress as well. It will be relieved, but it still will be there, because a stranger cannot do everything for you, right? So if I was in Nigeria, it would have been emotionally draining and mentally draining as well. So I think I prefer it now that I'm with my husband, spending time with him and him taking his place. Okay. The next one is communication. Communication. Then, I'm somebody that is, I wouldn't say I'm an introvert, but I'm more of a home girl. I'm not that kind of an outside best, because when I meet outside people, it takes me time to blend, that kind of thing. So I grew up, my mother was, I would say she was my best friend, because I was more of, like I said, in Indo, so she was my friend. I discussed everything with him, so everything with her. So when I got married to my husband, it's like I transferred that friendship, normally to him. So anything that I see I want to talk about, I need that person that is close to me, to discuss it with around. You don't know whether to call him, whether he'll be at work, because I don't know how the system works. Even though he tells me this is the time I'll be at work, but when you get that gist, you want to share it with, him, and he will not be available. By the time he will be available, the gist are jolly. So the gist must have been cold. But when you now start telling him about the gist, it'll be like you're telling him, a normal story. But assuming he was around, and you just, if that thing happens, sometimes, I will tell you, sometimes I'll get a hot gist like this. And when my husband, when I call him or when we talk, I'll just be laughing. He said, talk now. I say, wait, or I laugh first. That kind of thing. It's just the fun of it. So the communication, and again, sometimes that time we're far. Communication, and there was nothing like WhatsApp. There was nothing like Instagram at that time. So if there's anything, let's say there's an argument, something like that, you can just type. If you cannot get him on phone, maybe you will just type and come in now. Maybe you're angry. But by the time you type come in now, I'm just giving you an example. When he now reads it, what he will understand is come in now. Like he might think that maybe you're trying to be authoritative. That meanwhile, you're just trying to be ire. In my language, they say ire. Do you understand? So that's communication of a thing, discussing things with your husband as in that time. That time, yeah. When getting that flavor, that time, it's better now that we're together. The next one is, closing every loophole of insecurity. You can agree with me that in every love, there's always that slight slim of jealousy. If you love somebody, there is no way you can tell me that you cannot at some point be jealous. Yeah, there's always anything that is taking his time so much away from you. It might not be the opposite sex. It might be maybe his friends taking so much of his time. And yeah, but because you're not staying close to him, that, that kind of loophole of, jealousy and untrust. Somebody might come back from Nigeria and say, oh, the women that their husband left, what they are doing is just doing this thing, doing that thing. As a human being, you might trust your wife, but that human feeling might be there. You might think it, and you don't know. You might not know when you act it. That's the truth. So I just don't need that kind of pressure in my marriage. So to close that every loophole of insecurity, jealousy, and all that. Even now that I'm with my husband, we don't see all the time. Just that we sleep on the same bed. He works in the morning and I work in the afternoon. So we basically, talk on the phone, and maybe when he's coming out and I'm going out. That's when we see. So it's not like we sit down all the time to talk. But that insecurity of a thing doesn't even occur for us to think about it. Why? Because we are together. Do you get what I'm saying? But if we're apart, yeah, it can happen, because that thing you saw and you liked it, somebody else might, you know how mind works. And for women too, yeah, it happens. Another thing, the last but not the least, is worry. I used to worry a lot that time, about my husband. If they tell me something is happening in Europe, I'll think it's happening everywhere. Even though I pray for him that time, I still do. But the distance and how the media portrays things sometimes will make you get worried. Remember the time of COVID, the number they call in Spain sometimes, it might be true, it might not be true, but it's not the way it is here. My family then, they were worried, the number. But that's not the way we're seeing it, because we are here and we are seeing things. Do you get? So assuming I was in Nigeria, being the Nigerian wife, and my husband is here, and I'll be hearing all this, I'll be scared. I'll be over, if assuming I was there with my kids, I'll be worrying about taking care of the children. I'll still be worried about my husband. I hope nothing happens to him, because then the number was very scary. Do you get? But now that it makes me less worried about him, because I know by the grace of God he's protected. I know there's even the period of COVID, we're still going to work, but I wasn't worried. But assuming I was in Nigeria, it would have been more, and some other things, I worry less about him and about family. Have you been in a long distance relationship before? How did it work for you? Is it something you want to go back again? How was your experience? Do you prefer it to, maybe if you have joined your husband, do you prefer it? Which one do you think is better? But personally, like I said, I know that some people, it's not by choice, but I will honestly advise, even if you're apart from your husband, let it not be for too long. Anything that goes contrary to the way the word of God is the one that instituted marriage. He said a man will leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife, and cleaving is not staying apart. Yes, that's the way I understand it, is not staying apart. I understand, there are another, distant relationship where you're in the same country and the man leaves, for a walk or something. That one is somehow different. You're not really that apart, even though that one won't, be that easy as well. But the one I really will not advise is you living in one country and your husband living in another country. I feel it creates pressure. It puts pressure on marriage. From my experience and from the little I know, it puts pressure on marriage. Let me know what you think. And thank you so much for watching, and I will see you very, very soon in my next one. Bye.